I was the first counselor hired at Camp Park's Job Corps Center in Pleasant, California. I had been recruited by a man named Roy Bueller, who'd been my psych prof at the University of Oregon, my last quarter of college, and I had gotten the second highest final exam score in the class of maybe 30 students. The woman who did better was a graduate student in psychology, and I had just eaten it up learning about what schizophrenia is, and of course I by then worked in a mental hospital, but I really got onto it. And one fine day I got a phone call working in a acute psych ward at OHSU in Portland that I was wanted on the phone. And in those days, people didn't get phone calls. Obviously, they didn't have cell phones. But so what the hell was that? So I went to get on the phone, and Roy Bueller is on there, and he says, well, you've written me and asked me to recommend you to get into graduate school in clinical psychology. And I'll be happy to do that, but I'd rather offer you a job. Well, the next thing I knew, I was talking to Judy, and we were deciding to move to Pleasant, California, go to work in the Job Corps. And so when I got down there were, I think, 4 psychologists that, it was either 3 or 4, that were getting this going and getting the idea going that there wouldn't be rules, there'd be 2 immutables, no violence and no weapons, and that we would have these meetings every day, guided group interaction, they called it, and that we would talk our way out of violence. There was no lockup there on the center. The guys that drove around there that were in security had no guns and no permission to grab people and throw them down on the ground, handcuff them, and drag them off and somewhere and lock them up. There was no place there on the center to lock people up. You'd have to call the sheriff from the county, and that would create a big public relations problem. So we had a non-violent place with, by the time I left there were 2,000 corpsmen there. So I got there, I was the first counselor hired, and they gave me the 3rd dorm to open with 26 corpsmen. And I came in early the day after we got corpsmen to meet with the night counselor to talk about how we were going to get these guys up and get them off to class. And Phil Osborne and I were sitting there just beginning the conversation when we heard a noise down the hall. This would have been at 7:30 or something in the morning. We went out and looked, and the corpsmen were out sweeping and mopping the hall and all dressed, ready to go to breakfast. And we were like, what? And what we discovered was, when these guys found out this was for real, they were actually going to get some real training and be able to get a $10 an hour job as a plumber or office machine repairman or something like that, or a cook. You couldn't drive them away from that place with a team of horses. And they wanted to get to class on time because they wanted this training. That's the way that place, that's the way the cookie crumbled there. And all of these recent graduates from college with BA generalists would go down to the dining room with the corpsmen and eat with them. And the corpsmen would watch carefully out of the corner of their eye the way these middle class counselors held their fork and so on, and learned table manners, learned how to converse over a meal in a small group. They were so hungry to learn. And of course, one of the main things we taught them was how to approach people you wanted to ask for a job. They didn't know how. It wasn't about knowing how to fill out an application. It was knowing about how to interact and say you wanted the job, and be able to present yourself. So the whole thing was such a success, and I enjoyed it so much. Within less than a year, I got moved to another new, what they called section with several dorms. And Rudy Brooks and Glenn Morrison and I were the three supervisors under Elmore Martin, who was the psychologist, who was the section head, they called it. Elmore would come in every night and talk for 30 minutes or something about how you get the corpsmen to open up and talk with each other and accept each other. And then he'd take off, and it was up to Rudy and Glenn and me to actually go out and sit in with the counselors, who many of them had very little experience. Well, I was only 26, but I was a lot more seasoned in life than a lot of the guys that got hired straight out of college. And what I discovered in all that was that a lot of young people graduating from college, they were the first person that in their family that had ever gotten a college degree, and they'd come out of some pretty rough circumstances, and they'd get out of college, and as soon as they got the job in the Job Corps, they bought many of them a Mustang, a new inexpensive new car, and they got some sort of nice, simple but nice clothes. And then they didn't want to dirty their hands with insisting that the corpsman clean the hallway and the restroom and the shower room and so on. They wanted to kind of be bank tellers. So we had to work on that too, to keep getting, many of them were very motivated and had all the right instincts, but some of them wanted to go to the manicurist rather than getting their hands dirty and really getting down to it and interacting with the corpsman. But we helped them do that, and it was a big success, and it was so rewarding to me. It gave me a faith in people and the knowledge that people can overcome their ignorance and their biases, and they can work together and care about each other. And I've carried that with me all the rest of my life. Now I want to tell a story about how I discovered why our approach sometimes didn't work in the Job Corps. Maybe close to 50 years, let's call this Naomi just didn't get it. One of the people I liked best in the Job Corps was a woman named Naomi Mitchell, who at the time we were working together in Parks Job Corps Center, was married to a guy that everybody called Mitch. And he had sort of tangential job there in the Job Corps, didn't have his own dorms, but she did. And she was one of the most spectacular people that I ever knew. She'd worked in the Oakland Public Parks as an activity director before she came there, and she had a bachelor's degree from a college in the Bay Area. She was smart, and she was so confident of herself. She always came to our meetings where the two shifts changed. Elmore Martin would present for about an hour, teaching us how to do the guided group interaction. And by having it around 3 o'clock or something, the people in the heavy shift were the ones that were there in the late afternoon and up until 11 o'clock at night. And that's when we had all the heavy guided group interaction meetings and so on. And then after that, the night shift would come on. But by having the meeting about 3 o'clock, we could get the people who were on the day shift, who were there interacting with the corpsmen about what was going on in their classes and so on. So anyway, she'd always come waltzing in about 30 minutes late, and she had to climb up a little hill to get to the office where I had these meetings. And here would be this devastatingly vital young black woman. And I'll have to tell you, I was although I was happily married and certainly not looking around for get into an affair with somebody, I was pretty blown away by Naomi. Well, as things went on, one fine day, there was a ruckus out in the street, and the corpsmen from 2 or 3 of the sections poured out there, and they were milling around and being threatening toward each other. The newspaper called it a riot. Well, nobody got injured. Nobody was getting beaten on. There weren't fights that we had to drag people apart. There was a lot of yelling and marching around and flexing muscles. But I noticed in all that some of the most active people in all that were a couple of big, powerfully built black guys from her dorm. So I thought, So I went and visited her dorm soon after that to take a more intense look. I had felt very confident she was so strong that she had everything under control. But when I got there, what I found was a matriarch who was telling the corpsmen, giving them directions and edicts, not the methodology that Elmer Martin was promoting. And I kind of remember later that she kind of was sarcastic about his presentations. Many years later, Mary and I went to visit her in D.C. when they were just opening the African American Cultural and Historical Museum, and she was working for a city council person, and she got us tickets, and we were some of the first people from the public who'd gotten in there to view that wonderful place. And her back was bothering her sufficiently that she didn't feel that she could be on her feet for 3 hours or something. And so she didn't go with us. But at any rate, we got to talking about cultural things, and she got to talking about her experiences in the Job Corps. And she started telling me, yeah, well, I got those young men to do what I wanted to do because I told them if they didn't obey me and follow my orders, I would get them thrown out of the Job Corps. I was like, what? That's what you took away from that? That's the way you were operating? You never did buy our approach of talking it through. And Judy and I had been there to visit her in the early 80s in DC, and she was going through a divorce at the time, and she was telling us how much difficulty she was having getting her lawyer to do the things she wanted him to do. And my being right in the heart of my career as a lawyer, about 1/4 of which was divorces and child custody, I tried to, as a friend, give her a few suggestions. And oh my God. So many years later, I don't remember what made it come up, but she said to me, is that why you didn't invite me to your wedding to Trish? Because I hadn't, and she'd heard about it and just come. We've been friends, very intense friends, for many, many years, and I don't regret any of that, but I do regret her rigidity and her idea that the way you run things is you become a matriarch and you order the young men to do what you want them to do. Because they've had a lot of that by the time they get to be 16, 17, 18 years old. They've had a lot of that, and we got pretty tired of it. And the ones who have not caved in and become alcoholic or some kind of an inadequate response could be a little bit defiant, like those guys in her dorm who went down in the street and were flexing muscles around. That's a sad story about the Job Corps, but it didn't turn into a violent riot or anything, but it was sad when I discovered what the underpinnings of the problem were. That's the end of that one. The next one I want to say is in contrast to the one I just did about Naomi Mitchell. And I'll call that one Laurel Weinstein. There was this diminutive Jewish woman, maybe 5'4", who was in the midst of working on getting a doctorate in sociology at UC Berkeley, and took some time off. I don't think she ever went back to it. She eventually got a law degree in New York, but she came to work in the Job Corps, and she was this very pretty, very feminine woman who had a romance for a while with a young Mormon man there, which that's another whole story. But we started noticing that the guys in her dorm were just doing extraordinarily well, and there were no problems in the dorm. So she was one of the people I was supervising, so it was my job to go around and sit in on some of her meetings with her corpsman anyway. But I went there this one day just intensely curious about how it seemed that she was so effective. What I found was that she had this approach where she would bring something up like, oh, I heard from the office machine repair people today that there's been some absentee problems with you, James, or you, Ralph. And the guy that she was kind of bringing up short would get up, some of them, and say, Ms. Weinstein, I lost my, there was some excuse, and she'd say, oh, I'm just so disappointed. I'm just so disappointed in you. I knew you could do better than that. I'm so disappointed. And sometimes when the meeting would end, I have this image in my mind still, a couple of these guys that she'd given a haircut in front of the whole group, standing in the bar, still arguing their case. But Ms. Weinstein, And she said, oh, I'm just so disappointed. No scolding, no threatening, just we have a relationship of trust and you're not quite getting up to the highest standard of that, and I'm disappointed. And they were so taken by her and her intelligence and her verbal skills and her ability to bond with them and care about them. Miss Weinstein, I'm just so disappointed. I love that girl. Even though she did freak out one night when I was down at the control center, and the call came up that she discovered some ants in the dorm, and she was just off the rails. Ants! Oh God! She was a city girl, I'll tell you. I guess they don't have ants in the city, I don't know. Maybe not big black and white ones, black and red ones like those were. Anyway, Laurel Weinstein.